Can you imagine standing at the edge of a sacred moment, only to be turned away? This is a restricted area, sir. Military funeral, 4-star general, no clearance, no entry, barked the guard, his eyes barely flickering toward the old man before him. Just another figure in a faded uniform, out of place, out of time, right? But oh, how wrong that assumption was. Franklin Hayes didn't argue, didn't shout. He just stood there, quiet as a shadow, clutching a wilted flower in his trembling hands. Inside those towering gates, cameras flashed like wildfire, metals sparkled like constellations, and flags soared high for a national hero. No one noticed the lone soul outside, no one, that is, except the general who would soon halt an entire ceremony just to walk out and salute him. Can you feel the weight of that moment? Welcome to Heartfelt Gratitude Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness pierce through the noise. Let's dive into what really unfolded that day. The sky over Quantico, Virginia, hung low, a somber gray that seemed to hush the world beneath it. Early fall had kissed the trees along the hills, their leaves blushing with the first hints of rust. A gentle wind tugged at the American flags lining the path to the cemetery gates. Didn't they flutter like whispers of the past? Inside Quantico National Cemetery, hundreds gathered, military officials, soldiers, dignitaries, all in crisp uniforms, shoes gleaming like mirrors, faces etched with solemn pride. This wasn't just any burial, no, this was the farewell to General Marcus R. Connors, a 4-star legend who'd commanded U.S. Special Operations across continents. A man draped in every honor a nation could offer, his state funeral drew a crowd reserved for the truest heroes. Security. Impenetrable. Names were checked twice, ID badges glowed under scanners, no one slipped through without clearance. Not former officers, not retirees, not even Franklin Hayes. Or so they thought. There he stood, at the far edge of the gate, bathed in the tender light of a rising sun. Franklin Hayes, shoulders slightly hunched, his uniform old but pressed with care. Once a deep green, it had faded to a soft gray-blue over decades, its brass buttons dulled by time. But oh, the stitching was tight, the boots polished to a quiet shine, his hat tilted just so. No medals adorned his chest, only a single-unit patch on his shoulder and, in his hand, a white lily, wilted yet cradled in a strip of cloth like a treasure. 5 hours he traveled by bus that morning, 5 hours from Roanoke, with a transfer in Richmond, then a final rattling ride that left him at a bench 3/4 of a mile from this very spot. Did he ask for a ride? Call ahead? No. He simply came to say goodbye. How could anyone turn away such quiet devotion? Franklin approached the gate, each step slow and deliberate, until a young sergeant in crisp blues blocked his path. I'm sorry, sir. This is restricted, private funeral service. Do you have clearance? Franklin blinked, his pale blue eyes cloudy yet steady as stone. No, he murmured, voice soft as the wind. I just came to pay respects. The guard's brow furrowed. We've got a list of authorized guests, are you family? A shake of the head. I served with him, Franklin said, simple and true, a long time ago. The guard's gaze swept over him, those wrinkled hands, those worn shoes, that lonely lily. Sorry, sir. No credentials, no entry. Did Franklin argue? Raise a fist. No. He just nodded once, stepped aside, and took his place by the outer wall, unyielding, unbroken. There he stood, the breeze teasing his sleeve, rooted like an oak. Inside, the ceremony swelled to life, rows of generals, foreign dignitaries, the Secretary of Defense, a folded flag gleaming in the light, the mournful hum of bagpipes, taps drifting like a memory across the hills. But outside, Franklin Hayes stood alone, that flower trembling in his grip, not angry, not bitter, just waiting. Who could have guessed someone was watching? Colonel Logan Marks, one of General Connor's old aides, caught sight of him through the iron bars. That uniform, faded but proud, struck him first, then the patch, Vietnam, Reconnaissance Battalion, Ghost Company, a unit erased from the books for over 50 years. Logan's eyes narrowed. Could it be? Yes, there he was, Franklin Hayes, the man his commander swore had saved his life not once, but twice. Logan turned to the 4-star general by the casket. "Sir," he whispered, urgent and low, "he's here." The general's head snapped around. "Who, Hayes?" And just like that, everything stopped. General Michael Thurman didn't flinch. He handed off his ceremonial saber, adjusted his jacket cuff with a flick, and marched toward the gates, each step deliberate, resounding. The honor guard froze, the musicians fell silent, the crowd held its breath as he reached the cemetery's edge and flung the gate wide himself. He stepped outside. Can you picture the power in that choice? Franklin, unmoved for over half an hour, looked up, startled. General Thurman stopped mere feet away and snapped to attention. Then, before the press, the soldiers, the politicians, he saluted, sharp, clean, a gesture for an equal. "Sir," he said, voice thick with feeling, "we've been waiting for you." Franklin blinked, bewildered. "You don't have to," he began, but the general cut him off. "With all due respect, Mr. Hayes, yes, I do." He turned to his aide, hand outstretched, and Colonel Marks stepped forward with a polished wooden box. In front of that hushed crowd, the general placed it in Franklin's hands, the ashes of General Marcus R. Connors. "Can you feel the weight of that trust? General Connors wanted you to deliver him home," Thurman said, "to his brothers, to the men the press never named, but who saved lives no one knew about." Franklin stared at the box, his hand shaking. "I thought they forgot," he whispered, voice barely a breath. The general's voice cracked. "We didn't." And behind them, in the cemetery's heart, the last veterans of Ghost Company, now in their 70s and 80s, rose from their seats. One by one, they stood tall, a line of honor at the ceremony's edge. As Franklin walked through those gates, carrying his friends' remains, each saluted, not from duty, but from memory, from love. Some debts run deeper than medals, holier than protocol. Real heroes don't flaunt ribbons, they bear them in silence until someone cries, "Welcome home." The wind shifted as Franklin crossed into Quantico's sacred ground, the ashes of a headline hero cradled in his quiet hands. General Thurman walked beside him, wordless. No cameras now, no microphones, just gravel crunching underfoot and the rustle of uniforms as senior officers stood, not for a 4-star legend, but for a man they'd never known. Franklin paused before the canopy, and in that stillness, his mind raced back. 57 years ago, February 1968, Key San Combat Base, what a hell it was. 77 days of shelling, bunkers crumbling, nights where smoke and fog fused into one. Franklin, deep into his second tour, was a sergeant at 29, older than most, but quick as lightning under fire. Day 34 of the siege, mortars roared again. 2 platoons away, the sky blazed. Over the comms, chaos, "This is line. Connors, my comms guys hit. We're outside the wire, taking fire." Franklin didn't hesitate, grabbed 2 smokes, clipped a flare, and ran into the storm. He found them behind a shattered shack, one bleeding, the other, Lieutenant Andrew Price, green from West Point, shouting orders with a pistol. Connors, scratched and limping, wrestled his radio pack. "Lost your map, boys," Franklin quipped, dropping smoke. "Who the hell are you?" Price snapped. No answer, just action. He hauled them through tracers and jungle fire, bleeding from his shoulder by the end, unnoticed. Cited for valor, he shrugged off the medal. "Just did what I was supposed to," he'd said. After his last tour, Franklin Hayes vanished, until now. Back at Quantico, Connor's letter burned in his pocket, words from a titan who never forgot that muddy night. As the crowd shifted for the reception, Franklin lingered under sycamores, alone. A young lieutenant approached, clipboard clutched tight. "Are you with the family? Press? Military attachment?" Franklin's reply, 3rd Recon Battalion, Charlie Company, Key San 1968. The kid faltered. That's not, it wouldn't be, Franklin said softly. I'm not here for the program. A captain across the field saw it all, the faded jacket, the general's glance, and knew. He darted to the command tent. 10 minutes later, General Andrew Price emerged, striding toward Franklin. The crowd parted, awestruck, as Price saluted, the man who'd carried him through fire. I told Marcus I'd find you, he said. He never stopped looking. Handing over the ashes, he declared, only you can bring him home. Before the mic, he roared, this man is why we're here. The crowd rose, saluting with their hearts. At the grave, Connor's letter whispered thanks, a debt no medal could repay. A year later, the Franklin Hayes Center stood tall, a haven for unsung heroes. Beneath the towering oaks of Quantico, where the air hung heavy with the scent of earth and memory, the crowd settled into a reverent hush. Rows of chairs brimmed with high-ranking officers, their dress uniforms a crisp symphony of symmetry, while families sat front and center, faces etched with solemnity, some shielding tears behind dark glasses. The casket hadn't yet reached the platform, and everything paused, poised on the edge of ceremony. But there, at the far fringe, near the iron gates dividing honor from silence, stood Franklin Hayes. Alone. Unmoving. Can you picture him? A faded flower drooped in his hand, its petals long wilted, and tucked inside his jacket, close to a heart weathered by over 50 years, lay an envelope from Connors, folded, cherished, a whisper from the past. He wasn't there for applause. He wasn't waiting for a spotlight. He was simply present, a quiet relic in a uniform the world had forgotten. How does it feel to stand so still, carrying a lifetime no one else can see? Then, the silence broke, shattered by a low, steady hum swelling from the distance. Engines. Big ones. Head snapped around, security tensed, eyes straining toward the tree lean. And there it was, a convoy bursting into view, 3 matte black military vehicles, official markings stark against their sides, escort flags fluttering like heartbeat pulses. At the center rolled a ceremonial limousine, its polished surface gleaming like a mirror under the sun. The crowd surged to its feet as the vehicles glided onto the grass, slow and deliberate, halting just shy of the procession. The driver's door cracked open first. Then, with a motion smooth as a soldier's drill, the rear door swung wide, and out stepped General Andrew L. Price. Not in everyday fatigues, oh no, this was full ceremonial glory, dark blue jacket, gold braid shimmering, white gloves pristine, a sword gleaming at his side. No sunglasses masked his eyes, no flourish softened his purpose, just raw focus, pure intent. What could this mean? What was about to unfold? The press scrambled, cameras clicking like a storm of locusts. The crowd parted instinctively, making way, but General Price didn't head for the casket. He didn't spare a glance at the podium or claim his seat in the front row. Instead, without a single word, he pivoted sharply and strode across the open green, straight toward the gate, straight toward Franklin. Whispers raced through the air like wildfire. Who is that? Where's he going? Why isn't he? But the questions faded, swallowed by awe, as the scene unfurled. Can you feel the weight of that moment building? Price reached the gate and stopped. In one fluid sweep, he stripped off his white gloves, baring his hands to the world. Then, slowly, with a deliberation that seemed to stretch time itself, he raised his hand to his temple and saluted, a crisp, unwavering tribute to a man outside the gates, to a figure in a uniform no one recalled, to Franklin Hayes. The salute lingered, a silent vow. When his arm finally fell, Price stepped forward, once, twice, until he stood face to face with the man who'd saved him 54 years ago in a jungle half a world away. No words passed at first. When Price spoke, his voice was low, steady as stone. I told Marcus I'd find you again, he said. He never stopped looking. And when he knew time was running out, he left one last instruction. Can you imagine the depth of that promise, carried across decades? Franklin stayed silent, his gaze fixed on the man before him, no longer the muddy young lieutenant he dragged to safety, but a general bearing a different burden. Price tilted his head toward the convoy. "I brought him here," he said. "But only you can bring him home." With a gesture, he summoned an aide forward, cradling a polished wooden box, the urn, holding the ashes of General Marcus Connors. Right there, in front of the nation's elite, the Secretary of Defense, half the Pentagon, the highest brass, General Andrew Price placed those remains into Franklin Hayes' hands. Can you feel the gravity of that trust? The weight of that honor? Cameras snapped furiously, but Price's raised hand silenced them in an instant. He turned to the crowd, now hushed in reverence, and stepped onto a low stone riser. Seizing the mic meant for the eulogy, he spoke. No notes, no rehearsal, just raw truth pouring out. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice ringing clear across the field, "there are moments in military life that echo beyond the battlefield, moments that define us, not by the medals we pin on, but by the debts we carry in our souls." He paused, then turned, his hand outstretched toward Franklin, who stood just behind, clutching the urn. "If not for this man," Price went on, "Marcus Connors wouldn't have seen 20. I wouldn't have lived past my first command. Everything we've built, every soldier trained, every mission won, would have crumbled before it began." Franklin's eyes stayed low, his hands steady as iron, holding far more than ashes. Price's voice thickened. "If there's one person who deserves to lead this final walk, it's Sergeant Franklin Hayes, Ghost Recon, Laos 1971. Can you hear the power in those words?" The silence split, first a single clap, then another, swelling into a slow, respectful tide as the entire gathering rose. Soldiers, generals, civilians, one by one, they stood and saluted. Hats lifted, tears fell silently, and the press. They lowered their cameras. Because some moments aren't meant to be captured, they're meant to be felt. Price turned to Franklin, his voice softening. "Will you walk with me, Sergeant?" Franklin hesitated, just a heartbeat, then nodded. Side by side, they stepped toward the flag-draped platform, Price on one flank, Hayes on the other, past stunned officers, past journalists, past wreaths and fluttering flags. As they neared the final row, the honor guard parted without a sound, clearing their path. Franklin climbed the stage and set the urn above the folded flag, not because rules demanded it, but because it was right. Because some men don't need medals, they need someone to say, "I never forgot you." How profound is that? The last notes of taps drifted away on the wind. No cheers followed, no anthem, just a silence so deep it carried its own weight. Franklin stood still beside the pedestal, his hand resting on the urn of the only man who'd ever called him brother in arms, even after stars crowned his shoulders. At Price's gentle nod, Franklin lifted the box again and turned. Soldiers lined the path, rigid in full dress, Marines, Navy, Air Force, Army, young and old, snapping to attention. Some salutes were sharp, others trembled, but all rose as Franklin began his walk down the central aisle, cradling Connors' remains with quiet grace. They saluted him, not the urn, him. And it spread. Veterans in civilian clothes hauled themselves up beside canes, old men with patched jackets lifted shaky arms, hats came off, tears streaked weathered faces. This wasn't protocol, it was remembrance, the kind the world too often forgets. By the time Franklin reached the family section, the whole cemetery stood. Cameras dropped, whispers ceased. In that sacred stillness, amid rank and title, he was the most honored soul there. No bows, no tears, just steady steps, the end of a journey from Laos mud to a nation's heart. Can you feel the honor in that? Later, after the last guest had left, after officers retreated to their cars and chairs were stacked, Franklin lingered. Beneath those tall oaks, at the gravesite where Connors' ashes now rested beside a headstone, Gen Marcus R. Connors, brother, commander, friend, he knelt, knees creaking with age. He lit a stick of incense, a private ritual from his pocket, its smoke curling into the crisp autumn air. His voice was soft, barely a murmur. I told you I'd make it. A pause. You always did hate flowers. Then, rest easy, kid. He bowed his head, and as he rose, he wasn't alone. General Price stood there, still in full dress, the day's weight etched into his face. He offered a small, yellowed envelope. What's this? Franklin asked warily. From Connor's safe, Price said. He said to give it to you, only if you came to the grave. Franklin took it, the paper crackling as he read a single, painstaking paragraph. Frank, you never let me thank you. Not really. You saved my life and vanished like it didn't matter. But it mattered to me. You're the only debt I carried that no medal, no command, no ceremony could repay. You gave me time to serve, to lead, to die at peace. If there's justice, they'll say my name with yours someday. Maybe then I'll feel worthy. Your friend, me. Franklin folded it, tucked it away. I didn't do it for thanks, he said. I know, Price replied. That's why you deserve it. Can you feel that bond? A year later, a ribbon sliced across a stone archway, applause ringing under a spring sun. Veterans, officials, reporters gathered beneath a bronze sign, the Franklin Hayes Center, a sanctuary for healing, funded by the Marcus Connors Legacy Foundation, blessed by Price himself. More than a building, it offered PTSD counseling, therapy, woodworking, and a garden of forgotten names. The crowd craved a speech from Franklin, but he stood aside, a dark coat draped over him, clutching a faded white lily. No cameras hounded him, just quiet nods from those who knew. He watched veterans cross the threshold, a legacy born of service, not fame. Enough, at last. Price joined him later, and Franklin muttered, I didn't want a building. Price smiled. It's not a building, it's a thank you, in stone, for every man who gave more than he got. Franklin glanced at the lily, then the doors. You think they'll come? They already have, Price said. As Franklin walked away, the world watched with respect, not curiosity, saluting silently in their hearts. Because one man's quiet debts became a nation's memory. Isn't that heroism? In the shadows, kindness shines, unseen, unasked, but never unfelt. Some heroes just want to know someone's fed today. That can change everything. The story of Franklin Hayes ignites a fire in me about how we live, how we see each other, and what we value in this chaotic world. It's not just a tale of a forgotten hero, it's a blazing wake-up call to our lifestyle, obsessed with flash and noise, while the quiet warriors slip through the cracks. I'm furious and inspired all at once. We chase trends, worship the loudest voices, and plaster our lives across screens, yet we're blind to the Franklins, the ones who bleed duty and sacrifice without a single selfie to prove it. That's a disgrace to everything they stand for. Socially, this hits me hard. We owe our veterans more than parades or a fleeting, thank you, we owe them our eyes, our ears, our respect. Not just the decorated generals, but the unsung, the ones like Hayes, standing alone with a wilted flower until someone finally notices. It's criminal how we let history bury them, how we let rank and title dictate worth. General Price's salute. That's what I crave for our society, a raw, gut-wrenching recognition that shatters the shallow hierarchies we cling to. I feel it in my bones, we need to honor the invisible, not just the spotlighted. This story demands we rethink everything. I'm moved to tears by Hayes' final walk, humanity rising, not because of protocol, but because it's right. It's a plea to live deeper, to see beyond the surface, to carry respect as a lifestyle, not a gesture. Franklin didn't need a building or a speech, he needed that moment. And damn it, so do we. Let's stop glorifying the loud and start saluting the silent. That's the world I want to fight for. Forget this tale, and history fades. Subscribe to Heartfelt Gratitude Stories, where justice lives, kindness endures, and no quiet deed is lost.